Welcome to Revive Hi-Fi Canada, and today's receiver feature is the Yamaha R-S700. And here on Revive Hi-Fi Canada, our goal is really to get more people interested in this hobby that we have loved over the years, and just to get you to know more about some of the items that you might find and discuss some of the items that you might find new or used in your local area. And this is the Yamaha R-S700. This is a stereo receiver. It's not an audio video receiver, an AVR. It is a 2-channel strictly analog receiver, and I'm gonna zoom in a little bit on it right there for you. It is a nice piece, I would say. Let's just start up with the general functionality of it. The volume, of course, is the knob on the right, followed by the input knob, and then the 4 bass, treble, balance, and loudness knob that Yamaha incorporates on many of their receivers. The loudness, at least in my experience, tends to increase maybe the more mid-range frequencies, and it helps you to hear more singing, for example, more vocals when you're listening at lower volume. I would say the Yamaha receiver is a very nice piece of equipment. I'm going to go more into its sound impression. It is very well made. So going into the construction, it is a full metal chassis, as you can imagine. It weighs in at about 25 pounds, so it is no joke. It comes from a series of receivers from Yamaha that I've been kind of following but never really had a chance to try. The RS300, 500, and this is the 700. I believe this is the top of the line model from that group, and I originally got for free. Somebody gave me a Yamaha RS201, and I had that playing in my office with my speakers, and I thought, wow, you know, this thing doesn't sound so bad. And I had old Yamaha receivers that were all called this natural sound, and I wasn't always the biggest fan of those. And I will be reviewing an RX570, which I do really like. And this sort of reminds me more of that more older school Yamaha sound. I had an RXV 2400, which is a AVR, but it does a heck of a job on music, and it was super powerful, but I didn't really like it so much compared to the RX570, which we'll talk about in the future, that I have in my garage system, and this RS700. The RS700 it does have a different sound signature. I noticed when I first tried the RS201 that had a different sound signature than what I was used to hearing from Yamaha. And this is very similar to that RS201, but with a lot more power, a lot more poise in this RS700. So the RS700 is 100 watts per channel. It has it going into 8 ohms. It has a 0.02% total harmonic distortion at 100 watts going into 8 ohms. It also has 4 ohm capability. It's got a really heavy duty power transformer inside. It's not a Toroidal transformer. It's an EI transformer. It also has dual heat sinks. So I know I had tried, I think, an RS300, and it may have had a single heat sink. I've never tried an RS500, but this RS700 has a dual heat sink. I do think it's a little similar to an AS500 and 700 that I tried in the past, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But it sounds really nice, this Yamaha. It, of course, has AM/FM stereo radio, and I am one of those old school people that still listens to the radio. The radio on this sounds pretty decent, but if you go back and compare to the more old school vintage receivers, even like the NAD C740 and the NAD 7155 that I had on the channel before, this doesn't really come close to the radio. I mean, it's not quite as good. I mean, I would imagine the radios here, it's similar to the radio that I had on the RS201. It's there. The focus here is the sound. This has a lot of inputs. It has 6 RCA inputs, including a phono stage. I tried the phono stage. It's very pleasant sounding, and that's kind of the theme of this review, is that this receiver is very pleasant. It has a very soft type of sound. It also has a unique kind of feature that is called CD direct amplification. So if you're playing a CD through this, which sounds quite nice, it has something that actually is called CD direct that it says it maximizes the CD signal to noise ratio, and I did find it made a tiny bit of difference when I turned it on. I didn't see it here making a ton of difference. It also has pure direct, which bypasses all the tone balance and loudness and bass controls, treble and bass controls, so the tone controls. It's that I like. It gives you quite a nice sound, especially when you have a nice source coming in. It has a remote. I really like receivers and amps that have remotes, so this is one of the amps that I tend to keep around, along with my Marantz PM6006, which we'll review later, and you've heard many times already on the channel. I'll be focusing more on this receiver on the channel for the next little while. I have to say, just thinking about how it sounds, I've never actually heard a receiver, and I've tried probably 100 to 150 amps and receivers. I've never heard one that sounded so even-keeled. That's the best way I can describe this one. There's really nothing that sticks out. Like the vocals don't really come up front. The bass doesn't really overpower you. The treble, the highs are just nicely high, and then it'll just kind of taper off. So it just goes high enough on the highs that you're not getting that shrillness. Whereas my RX V2400 from back in the day, that one seemed to be a bit more shrill. Even on movies, you could tell. So this one I really appreciate because it gives you those nice highs, but it doesn't give you that harshness at all in the sound. It's just really quite amazing. I would call this extremely neutral, as I've titled the review or the discussion here. It is pleasantly neutral. It is extremely, I would consider it more polite sounding than many of the amps that I've heard, and I think that comes down to just the straight up neutrality that it presents. I mean, it doesn't really push in any sort of direction in highs, mids, or lows. It just gives you this really clear and controlled sound, and it effortlessly, I mean, it has 100 watts per channel, so it's kind of expects in the kind of rooms that, you know, most of us have in our house, is that it'll give you more than enough volume with 100 watts per channel effortlessly. It does that. It's very impressive in that way. It has, one thing I like is that the imaging is really nice on this. It gives you a very nice stereo image, and you can pick out, it separates everything within the image. Like you can get individual instruments. I love the way string instruments sound, like guitars and horns sound really nice on here, because you have that lack of shrillness. You just have a very perfectly balanced sound. It's extremely balanced on this receiver. So that's a very positive attribute, but at the same time, it's not always a positive attribute. It just has, the reason being is that sometimes you won't, some receivers and amplifiers give you a bit more of a V-shaped sound. They give you more of a heavier bass emphasis or a sparkly treble emphasis. This doesn't do that. It gives you a straight ahead, just straight ahead performance, and it doesn't come across, because of that you might think it's quite gentle, and it doesn't come across in a muscular fashion, but this thing has a lot of power. So it is very well done, and it's very well made. Soundstage, it's huge. Like it because of that power, it can really make it sound, and it sound large, and it projects a very large, wide sound field. And these speakers are, of course, my Monitor Audio Silver 100 7G, probably one of my favorite speakers that I own, and I would say these pair quite well with the Yamaha for a more neutral type of sound. They do, and I think that that's what this Yamaha is all about. It doesn't give you too much of anything. It gives you everything pretty much evenly, and that's nice, actually. One other attribute on this Yamaha, or a couple, is that it has a subwoofer out. One thing I couldn't figure out was I don't think there's any bass management in this receiver, so it's not really any. You can't really control and take away the high frequencies from your speakers, and send those to the subwoofer. You kind of just have to tune your subwoofer to fill in the lower frequencies that your bookshelf speakers can't really fill in, or even your towers. And then you have it also has pre-out jumpers on the back, and what that means is that you're able to connect this to a power amp. So that's kind of nice. You're able to use this as a power amp. I think it also has an in as well. So there's some nice functionality to this, and it's a very well made, well put together receiver. I like it a lot. The tone controls do just enough that it kind of makes you, it's nice, like it doesn't overpower. And I think there might be some people who may or may not appreciate this amp. I think those people who like more of a dynamic, kind of more in your face kind of treble or bass may or may not appreciate this amp. I can sit and listen to this amp with these speakers pretty much all day because of how gentle and how perfectly textured the sound is. So like, one thing that also sticks out to me about this amp is it's kind of got a 3D kind of sound to it, in that all of the details come out, but it's not harsh. So you're hearing every little thing come out, and it makes it almost feel kind of 3D on some of the speakers that I try, especially these monitor audios. I do think that that's a nice thing to have on this amp, and overall I would say it's a really nice receiver. And I don't have many stereo receivers. I have my Marantz that you've seen on a few, and my NAD, but this I would put right up there. I consider this one of my keepers. I love this receiver. It's just a well-made piece, and yeah, I think that's all I gotta say at this point with the Yamaha. It's got great. The highs are not too shrill. The mids are just kind of right there. You don't miss anything, and the bass is just enough. Extremely tight bass, and I do think it's part of the reason is that these Yamahas, especially this one, tends to have extremely high damping factor, and the damping factor I believe is I think it's in the 250 range. If you don't quote me on that, I'm just going to double check that. The damping factor is, actually I don't even see the damping factor, but I know it has a very high damping factor. So the damping factor is very high, and I know that is the case on many Yamaha receivers. I think it's part of their, or amplifiers, because it's kind of part of their, what I think is their philosophy, in that it allows you to control a woofer very well. So it actually allows you to attenuate the woofer. Yeah, it's around 240, 250 for the damping factor for this. It has good control, and when you think about a speaker like the Monitor Audio, which has to get a lot of bass and has to get a lot of the mid-range out of that 8-inch driver, having a well-damped, so as it doesn't overbloat the bass, which it doesn't, receiver or amp to control it is very good, because I think it improves clarity on your sound, because now you've got that driver having to perform both bass functions and mid-range functions, and the receiver, when it has this kind of control over the woofer with that damping factor, is able to do that a little bit more effectively, I would imagine. So yeah, it does. These two pair quite well together. I appreciate them. I think yeah, I do enjoy them. So that's all I got to say on Revive Hi-Fi Canada today about the Yamaha R-S700. Thank you very much for watching, and if you enjoy our channel, please feel free to subscribe, and see you next time on Revive Hi-Fi Canada. Bye now.